Welcome to our deep dive, and today we're exploring the world of Sri Madhvacharya.
Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Wow.
We've got these.
Absolutely. He's considered one of the most important figures in Vedanta, and his philosophical system, known as Dvaita, offers a really unique perspective on the nature of reality, the self, and the divine.
So, for our listeners who might not be Vedanta experts, could you give us a quick overview? Like, what is Vedanta in a nutshell, and where does Madhvacharya fit into this tradition?
Okay, imagine Vedanta as this ancient tree, right?
Okay.
With many branches representing different interpretations of the core Hindu scriptures, like the Upanishads.
Okay.
Each branch explores the nature of reality, the self, the divine, but from a different angle.
Okay. I like that. I like that visual.
Now, Madhvacharya founded the Dvaita school, which translates to dualism.
Dualism.
It's this unique branch that emphasizes a fundamental distinction between the supreme God, individual souls, and the material world.
So, unlike some other branches that might emphasize, say, merging with the divine, Dvaita posits a very real separation between these entities.
Exactly. Madhvacharya argued that this separation is essential to truly understanding reality and our relationship with God. It's a theistic philosophy, meaning it believes in a personal God,
Okay.
and it views the world we experience as real, not just some kind of illusion.
So right from the start, we see this emphasis on difference, on distinctness, which I find fascinating.
It's a key element of his philosophy, and it really sets Dvaita apart from other schools of thought.
Now, before we dive into the specifics of his philosophy, there's something I just have to ask about because it really caught my eye when I was reading through the guide.
What's that?
This whole idea that Madhvacharya is considered an avatar of Vayu, the god of life.
Ah, yes. It's quite a lineage.
It is. Could you elaborate on that a bit for us?
Well, he's considered the third avatar of Vayu, following Hanuman,
Oh, wow. Hanuman.
the monkey god known for his incredible strength and devotion.
Right, right.
And then Bhimasena, the powerful warrior from the Mahabharata.
Right. Okay, so these are some major figures in Hindu mythology.
They are, and they all embody this vital life force, this energy that upholds righteousness in the world.
So Madhvacharya, born in 1238 AD near Udupi, India, is believed to be part of this lineage of powerful figures who embody divine energy.
It's a pretty impressive start to a biography, wouldn't you say?
It definitely sets the stage for an extraordinary life. And speaking of biographies, I understand we have a rather unique one to draw on for his story.
That's right. We have the Samadha Vijaya, which is special because it was written by a contemporary of Madhvacharya, a disciple's son, Nuraya Panditacharya.
So someone who actually lived during Madhvacharya's time.
Which is pretty rare for figures from this era.
That's amazing. So it gives us a more personal, a more intimate glimpse into his life and teachings.
Absolutely. It's like getting a firsthand account from someone who knew him personally.
I love that. So let's dive into that life story, starting with his childhood. The guide mentions all these miracles that occurred, almost like something you'd read about in stories of saints or prophets. But these stories aren't just meant to entertain, are they? What purpose do they serve within the context of his life and teachings?
That's a great question. And you're right, the miracles are fascinating, but they're not just meant to be taken literally.
Right.
They often point to something deeper about Madhvacharya's character, his spiritual capabilities, maybe even the power of his philosophy itself.
Oh, okay, I like that. So they're like metaphors or symbols that help us understand something more profound about him.
Exactly. For instance, as a baby, Vasudeva.
That was his name before he became Madhvacharya.
Right, Vasudeva.
Yeah.
Well, he was accidentally fed a huge amount of boiled horse gram, which is something even adults struggle to digest.
Oh, wow.
But not only was he unharmed, he seemed to enjoy it.
So right from the start, we see these stories highlighting his extraordinary nature, setting him apart from ordinary children.
It's as if he was born with this unique capacity, this resilience and strength that would later manifest in his philosophical work as well.
Okay, that's a fascinating connection. Are there other examples where these miracles seem to foreshadow his future role as a philosopher and spiritual leader?
Absolutely. There's the story about him as a toddler following a bullock to the fields and getting lost all day.
Oh, no.
But he returned home unharmed and seemingly without any fatigue.
Wow.
It's almost like a metaphor for his later life, fearlessly venturing into uncharted territory, exploring complex philosophical ideas.
Right. Challenging established norms, but always maintaining this incredible focus and resilience.
Exactly. It's as if these early stories are giving us glimpses into the qualities that would later make him such a compelling figure.
So what about his journey into the world of philosophy and religion? Was there a specific event or experience that set him on this path?
Well, the guide suggests that from a very young age, Vasudeva felt this strong urge to correct what he saw as misinterpretations of the scriptures,
Mm.
to establish the supremacy of God. You know,
Right.
he perceived a lot of confusion and conflicting viewpoints within the existing schools of thought and felt this responsibility to clarify things.
So it's this yearning for clarity, for truth, that leads him to embrace sannyasa, the ascetic life, at the incredibly young age of 10.
That's right. And what's remarkable is that he even persuaded his parents to allow him to take this path, promising them that he would wait for another son to be born before leaving.
Oh, wow. Talk about responsibility. Even at such a young age, he was thinking of others, making sure his family would be taken care of.
It speaks to his compassion and his sense of duty, even as he pursued his own spiritual path.
Okay, so he embraces sannyasa at 10,
Yeah.
driven by this deep desire for truth and clarity. But here's where things get really interesting for me. He chooses Sri Madhvacharya Tirtha, a renowned ascetic from the Advaita, or non-dualistic school, as his guru.
Ah, yes. That's an interesting choice, isn't it?
It is, especially considering that he later founded the Dvaita school, which emphasizes duality.
Right. It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? The future champion of dualism learning from a master of non-dualism.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if studying under a teacher with opposing views actually played a role in shaping Madhvacharya's own perspective.
It's certainly a possibility. Maybe this early exposure to Advaita gave him a deep understanding of the arguments he would later challenge, helping him to strengthen his own philosophical foundations.
Like a blacksmith forging a stronger sword by testing it against the toughest steel.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of tests, young Vasudeva, who is now known as Puchapranya, in his ascetic life,
Right, right.
he didn't waste any time making an impression.
I've heard about this. He didn't just impress. He basically shook things up right from the start.
He did. The guide tells us that Puchapranya, during his studies, identified 32 errors in the very first line of a prominent Advaita text.
32 errors in one line.
One line. Talk about making a grand entrance.
That's incredible. It shows his incredible intellect, even at such a young age, and his deep understanding of the subject matter. But what about his guru? How did Sri Madhvacharya Tirtha respond to this bold move from his student?
Well, he was astonished, of course.
I can imagine.
He tried to counter Puchaprajya's arguments, but he couldn't refute his student's logic and insights. And here's the really remarkable part. He actually converted to Dvaita himself.
Wow. The student becoming the teacher, in a sense?
Exactly. It's a testament to the power of Puchaprajya's arguments, his persuasive abilities, and the strength of his convictions.
And that was just the beginning of his journey. I mean, he later received the name Ananda Tirtha upon formal ordination, but it's the title Madhva, meaning honey bringer, that really stuck.
Honey bringer. I love that. It hints at this sweetness and allure to his philosophy.
Perhaps it refers to the clarity and elegance of his arguments.
Yeah, or maybe it points to the ultimate goal of his philosophy. Liberation and that experience of pure bliss that he saw as the true sweetness in life. Beautiful. Both interpretations hold a lot of depth.
Now that we have this sense of his early life and the dramatic beginnings of his philosophical journey, I'm curious to know, how did he go about spreading this Dvaita philosophy? Did he stay in one place and build a following? Or did he venture out into the world, engaging with different communities and ideas?
He was definitely not one to stay confined to a single location.
Oh, really?
Nope. Madhvacharya traveled extensively throughout India, engaging in debates, winning over scholars from other schools of thought, and establishing his own following along the way.
So he's like this traveling philosopher, almost like a philosophical rock star, going from place to place, challenging the status quo, and attracting followers with the power of his arguments.
I love that image. It really captures the energy and dynamism of his life.
What were some of the core tenets of his Dvaita philosophy that he emphasized during these travels and debates?
Well, he consistently emphasized the supremacy of Lord Hari, a form of Vishnu, the reality of the world as we experience it, and this concept known as the Panchabedas, or the fivefold difference.
The fivefold difference. That sounds intriguing, but also potentially complex.
It is. It is. It's a key concept in the Vaita Vedanta, and it really gets to the heart of how Madhvacharya viewed reality.
Could you break it down for us? What exactly are these five distinctions he emphasized?
Absolutely. He argued for the fundamental differences between God and the individual souls, God in the material world, the souls in the material world, individual souls themselves, and material objects themselves.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there.
There is. It's a complex web of distinctions that make up the fabric of reality as we perceive it.
And it challenges the notion of ultimate unity or oneness that's found in other schools of Vedanta, doesn't it?
It does. This emphasis on difference is crucial to understanding Dvaita.
Okay, so we have God, souls, and the material world all distinct from each other.
Right.
But then even within those categories, there are distinctions, right?
Yeah, precisely. It's about recognizing the inherent diversity and uniqueness at every level of existence.
This is really making me rethink some of my assumptions about spirituality. But perhaps, before we delve into the implications of this five-fold difference, we should take a look at another fascinating chapter in Madhvacharya's life, his pilgrimage to Badari.
Ah, yes. The pilgrimage.
Yeah.
A pivotal moment in his journey.
What led him to embark on this journey? And what significance did it hold for him?
Well, imagine you're about to write this massive commentary on the Brahma Sutras.
Right, one of the foundational texts of Vedanta.
Exactly. It's only natural that you'd seek blessings and guidance from the source, right?
Of course.
But for Madhvacharya, that source wasn't just a text.
Hmm?
It was a person,
A person.
a legendary figure.
Okay, now I'm intrigued.
He set out on this pilgrimage to Badari, a sacred site in the Himalayas, to seek the blessings of Vedavyasa himself.
Vedavyasa. For those who may not be familiar, could you give us a quick rundown of who this figure is and why his blessing would be so significant for Madhvacharya?
Vedavyasa is basically a legend.
Okay.
I mean, he's the sage who compiled the Vedas, wrote the Mahabharata,
Wow.
and he's considered an incarnation of Vishnu himself.
So this pilgrimage wasn't just a physical journey for Madhvacharya.
No, not at all.
It was a deeply spiritual quest to connect with the very source of wisdom.
To receive divine guidance for his work.
So we have this incredible figure already making waves in the world of philosophy, and now he's embarking on a journey to a sacred site to seek blessings from a legendary sage who is considered an incarnation of God.
It's like something out of an epic tale, isn't it?
It really is. What happened on this journey? Did he actually meet Vedavyas?
He did, but the journey wasn't without challenges or some extraordinary events along the way.
Of course not. It wouldn't be a very good story if it was just a straightforward trip, right?
Exactly. First, he arrived at Lower Badari, where he presented his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita to the Lord.
Okay.
And get this, he actually heard a voice from the divine image.
Oh, a divine critique.
It was, telling him to expand on his work.
So it's one thing to seek blessings,
Right.
but to receive direct feedback from the very source of the text he was commenting on.
That's gotta be humbling.
Incredibly humbling. Did this encounter change his approach at all to writing his commentary on the Brahma Sutras?
Well, it certainly emphasized his devotion and his willingness to refine his understanding based on divine guidance.
So after this divine encounter, what happened?
Well, he then set out for Upper Badari,
Okay.
which is where Vedavyasa is said to reside.
Okay.
This part of the journey was filled with these dramatic events.
Oh, really?
Like-
what?
To stay focused, he took a vow of silence and fasting, and at one point he even had to send a disciple back by creating a fierce wind with just a wave of his hand.
That's amazing. Almost like he was channeling the power of Vayu himself.
Right. It's getting more and more epic with every detail.
But did he reach Upper Badari and meet Vedavyasa?
He did. And this meeting is described as this profound moment of spiritual transmission where he received direct teachings from the sage.
Wow. This is incredible.
And that's not all. There are so many stories about Madhvacharya's incredible intellect and seemingly superhuman abilities.
So this is where I start to wonder about the balance between, like, the miraculous and the philosophical in his life story. We have these incredible feats and divine encounters, but how do they relate to the intellectual rigor and depth of his philosophical work? Are they just embellishments to an already compelling biography?
That's a great question. It's something to ponder, isn't it? Are they just embellishments, or do they serve a deeper purpose?
Right. Do they point to the transformative power of his philosophy?
It's a possibility. Maybe they're showing us that by connecting deeply with the divine, we can transcend limitations, achieve things that seem impossible to ordinary humans.
It's like they're suggesting a different way of being in the world, a way that's informed by deep spiritual understanding.
Exactly. And I think as we delve further into his life and work, we'll continue to see this interplay between the extraordinary and the intellectual unfold.
Before we move on, can we do a quick recap? I just want to make sure I'm following along and that our listeners are too.
Of course, of course. Where do you want to start?
Let's start from the beginning. So we started by introducing Sri Madhvacharya as the founder of Daivat Vedanta.
Right, that unique form of theistic dualism within Hinduism.
And we talked about the significance of his lineage as an avatar of Vayu.
setting the stage for an extraordinary life.
Then we explored his childhood, marked by those miracles that foreshadow his future path.
Yes, and his decision to embrace sannyasa at such a young age, and that interesting choice of guru, a master of the opposing Advaita school,
And we talked about those remarkable early years as a student,
where he challenges those interpretations.
inverted his guru, earned the title Madhva, the honey bringer.
Is a great title.
It is. We also touched upon his travels, spreading that Dhyata philosophy, emphasizing the supremacy of Lord Hari, the reality of the world, and the fivefold difference.
God, souls, and the material world all distinct.
And then we ended by talking about his pilgrimage to Budari.
Filled with challenges, divine encounters, and ultimately that profound meeting with Vedavyasa himself.
It's been quite a journey so far. I'm ready to dive deeper into the specifics of his philosophy, his interactions with other scholars, and the impact he had on the world around him.
Well, then you're in luck, because that's exactly what we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good to me.
Hmm.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and philosophy of Sri Madhvacharya. We've uncovered so much already about his childhood, his journey into philosophy, that incredible pilgrimage to Budari.
It's been quite a journey so far.
It has. Now I'm ready to dig deeper into this whole Dvaita Vedanta thing.
Sounds good.
What are the key concepts that make this school of thought so unique?
Well, we've touched on the Panchabedas, right? The fivefold difference.
Yes.
I think it's worth revisiting that.
Okay.
Taking a closer look at how this concept really plays out in understanding reality and our relationship with the divine.
I agree. It challenges a lot of assumptions, about spirituality and the nature of the self.
It really does.
So let's unpack those 5 distinctions again.
Okay, so the first one.
Yeah.
The difference between the supreme God, independent, the source of all existence,
Right.
and us, the individual souls, dependent on him.
Okay.
So right away, this sets Gaia apart from those schools of thought that emphasize merging with the divine.
Right. Dissolving the individual self.
Exactly.
So Dvaita says we maintain our distinct identities even in liberation.
Precisely. And that brings us to the second distinction, the difference between God and the material world.
Okay.
Madhvacharya says this world we experience is real.
Yeah.
It's not an illusion.
Now, that's a key difference, because if the world is real and not just some illusion, it changes how we interact with it, our role in it, everything.
Absolutely.
So how did he reconcile this idea of a real world with the supremacy of God?
He saw the material world as God's creation, a manifestation of his will and power, but still separate, not to be confused with God himself.
So there's this hierarchy, with God at the top, the source of everything, but not the same as his creation.
Exactly.
Okay, what about us then? The souls in the material world.
That's the third distinction.
Yeah.
The difference between living beings, or souls, and the non-living world,
Okay.
highlighting our unique status within creation.
So we're not just part of the material world, we're something else, something more.
Right, with our own qualities, our potential.
Okay, so then what about differences among souls themselves?
That's the fourth distinction.
Okay.
And Madhvacharya emphasized this strongly.
Oh, yeah.
He said souls are not all equal. They have different qualities, potential.
Okay.
Some are closer to God,
Hmm.
others further away based on their actions, their inherent nature.
So even among souls, there's this hierarchy, like a spectrum of spiritual development.
Yes, and this ties into the concepts of karma and reincarnation, central to Hindu thought.
Right. So these differences are a result of past actions, choices we make.
Exactly. Which leads us to the final distinction, the differences among non-living things themselves.
So even within the material world, there's all this diversity, right?
Exactly. All these forms, elements, it's about recognizing the inherent uniqueness of everything.
Okay, so if everything's distinct, what does that mean for our spiritual journey? What's the point, and how do we achieve it within this framework of separation?
That's the big question, right?
It is.
Madhvacharya taught that liberation, moksha, it's not about merging with God.
Okay.
Not about becoming one with the universe. Instead, it's about the soul realizing its true nature as a servant of God,
Okay.
experiencing its inherent joy through pure love, knowledge of his greatness.
So it's about recognizing our distinctness,
Yes.
our individuality, but in a way that brings us closer to God.
Exactly. Not by dissolving those boundaries, but by refining them.
Through devotion and understanding.
Yes. It's about recognizing that our true fulfillment lies in this loving relationship with the divine.
This relationship where we acknowledge our dependence on God, but also our own unique identity as souls.
It's a beautiful balance, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So how did Madhvacharya see the role of knowledge and devotion in this journey of realizing our true nature?
He believed true knowledge was essential for spiritual progress.
Okay.
He emphasized using perception, inference, and scripture to gain a correct understanding of God, ourselves, the world.
So it's not just about blind faith, right?
No, not at all. He believed through deep understanding comes devotion and ultimately liberation.
So engaging our intellect, using reason to arrive at a deeper understanding of the divine.
Exactly.
And that's where his interpretation of the Rig Veda comes in, right?
Yes. Remember, the Rig Veda is often seen as this collection of hymns and rituals,
Right.
not necessarily a source of philosophical discourse.
And you said he was the first philosopher to really delve into the Rig Veda for its philosophical insights?
He was. He saw it as this profound source of spiritual and philosophical wisdom, arguing that every verse, even those focused on rituals, praising deities, ultimately pointed to the supremacy of Vishnu.
Oh, wow.
And he didn't just claim this, he demonstrated it through detailed commentaries on 40 hymns from the Rig Veda.
40 hymns. So he was reading between the lines.
He was, finding deeper meanings, challenging traditional interpretations.
This seems to be a recurring theme with Madhvacharya, this boldness, questioning those norms, pushing boundaries.
He was a true innovator, a deep thinker, and his work on the Rig Veda has influenced later scholars.
Encouraging them to see those hidden depths within these ancient texts.
Precisely.
Now, we can't forget about his famous debates, right? With scholars from other schools of thought.
Ah, yes, the debates.
The guide mentions some specific encounters that highlight his sharp intellect, debating skills.
There's this fascinating account of his encounter with two Buddhist scholars, Buddhasagara and Vadisima. They tried to trap him with their arguments, but Madhvacharya defeated them with concise, one-sentence responses.
One-sentence responses.
Yeah.
He must have been incredibly sharp.
Quick-witted and brilliant.
Do we know what they were debating? What kind of philosophical points?
The guide doesn't give specifics, but they were Buddhist scholars.
Right.
So likely they challenged his belief in a permanent self or soul.
A fundamental difference between Hinduism and Buddhism.
Exactly. So he wasn't just engaging with other Hindu philosophers.
He was stepping outside of his philosophical bubble, taking on different traditions.
Engaging with diverse perspectives.
I like that.
It shows his confidence in his own position.
Right. His ability to defend against any challenge.
Precisely. But maybe the most striking example of his debating prowess is the story of that grand philosophical gathering at
Rajamahandri.
on the banks of the Godavari River.
Okay.
It was a major event, this philosophical showdown, with scholars from all over the region.
This sounds like the intellectual equivalent of a gladiatorial contest.
It was a battle of the minds.
Okay. Were there any particularly formidable opponents he faced there?
Two of the most prominent scholars there, Shapana Bhatta and Swami Shastri.
Okay.
They were staunch Advaitins, believed in that non-dualistic philosophy.
So this was a clash of titans, these great minds, each championing their worldview.
It was, and the guide tells us that both Shapana Bhatta and Swami Shastri were so impressed by Madhvacharya's arguments, his clarity, his personality, that they not only converted to Dvaita,
Wow.
but they requested to be ordained as his disciples.
That's incredible. Not just convinced by his arguments, but inspired to follow him.
It speaks to his persuasive abilities, the power of his presence.
These weren't just random scholars, were they?
No, Shapanabhata served as the prime minister of the Kakatiya kings.
Okay.
Swami Shastri as prime minister to the Gajapati kings.
So his influence was extending beyond the world of philosophy into politics.
Potentially. It's fascinating to think about how his ideas might have shaped not just philosophical discourse, but even the political landscape.
Before we move on from these debates, I'm curious about his debating style. Was he, I don't know, confrontational, aggressive, or was there something else that contributed to his success?
The guide highlights his charisma, his ability to articulate these complex ideas clearly.
Okay.
And he had this knack for using down-to-earth examples, making philosophy accessible, relatable, even in a debate.
So not this dry, esoteric philosopher.
No.
He was engaging, charismatic,
Exactly.
connecting with people on an intellectual and emotional level.
He had that gift.
Okay, but beyond the debating skills and charisma, there's this story about his time studying with Sri Madhvacharya.
Oh, yes. Tell me about it.
During a lesson on the Bhagavata Purana,
Hmm.
Madhvacharya picked up one of the texts and said, "This is the only correct one."
Interesting.
Could he tell just by looking at it?
Well, his guru was skeptical, naturally,
Of course.
challenged him to prove it,
Okay.
asked him to recite the most difficult chapter from memory,
Okay.
and to everyone's astonishment, he did it flawlessly.
That's not just impressive, it's like supernatural,
It is. It suggests this uncanny ability to discern truth,
right? To recognize the authentic from the corrupted.
to see beyond the surface.
How did he explain this?
He simply said, I learned it in a previous life.
A previous life. It's one thing to believe in reincarnation, but to claim direct experience of it, to use it as an explanation for his extraordinary abilities, it's something else entirely.
It adds a whole new dimension to his story, doesn't it?
It does.
Hmm.
It suggests this view that knowledge and wisdom aren't limited to a single lifetime, that learning is a continuous process that extends beyond our current existence.
A fascinating perspective.
It is. This deep dive is blowing my mind.
Me too.
We've got these foundational concepts of Dvaita Vedanta, the revolutionary interpretation of the Rig Veda, the memorable debates.
And all those details about his character and abilities.
Right. But there's one area I'm really interested in exploring further, and that's his impact, his lasting legacy.
Ah, yes, his impact on the world.
The guide highlights several aspects of his legacy, things that extend beyond his lifetime.
It's a rich and multifaceted legacy.
So let's talk about that. How is he remembered and revered today?
Well, for starters, the Krishna temple in Udupi remains a major pilgrimage site for Hindus, particularly those following Dvaita.
Right. And the system of 8 mathas that he established around the temple, they're still functioning today.
They are, with the pontiffs rotating every 2 years to oversee the worship.
That's incredible. A system put in place over 700 years ago, still operating today.
It's a testament to his vision, his organizational skills.
It really is. What about the rituals and practices associated with these mathas? Does each one have its own unique way of worshiping Krishna?
They do. Each matha has a specific set of rituals they uphold during their term of service,
Oh, interesting.
adding layers of complexity and richness to the temple's traditions.
So it's not just one static set of rituals, but this dynamic and evolving system that reflects the contributions of different lineages over time.
Precisely, all stemming from that foundation laid by Madhvacharya.
And it creates this sense of continuity, right?
Hmm?
Connecting present-day devotees with the teachings and practices of Madhvacharya himself.
It's like his presence is still felt, even centuries later.
What about his writings?
Yes, the writings. They continue to be studied and pondered over.
They must offer a lot of insights into his philosophy.
They do, especially his commentaries on the Brahma Sutras, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and other key texts.
Who studies these writings today?
Well, scholars and students of Dvaita Vedanta, of course, but they also offer practical guidance on spiritual practice, ethics, how to live a meaningful life.
Oh, so they're not just for academics.
Not at all. They're relevant for anyone seeking to deepen their understanding of Dvaita and its application to daily life.
So he's shaping how people think, how they practice their faith, even how they live their lives.
It's a profound legacy, isn't it?
It really is. And it extends beyond Dvaita itself, right? His ideas have influenced other schools of Hindu thought.
They have. They've sparked debates and dialogues, prompting other schools to refine their own positions.
So he's a catalyst for philosophical growth and evolution within Hinduism as a whole.
Exactly. And all of this stemming from the life and work of one man.
It's incredible to think about the ripple effects, how his ideas continue to resonate through time.
It speaks to the power of living with purpose and conviction.
He wasn't afraid to challenge those established norms, to stand up for what he believed in.
A true champion of truth.
And it highlights the importance of seeking knowledge and understanding, not just of our own traditions, but of different viewpoints as well.
He was a master debater, but also a deep listener, a careful reader, engaging with those opposing views to refine his own thinking.
That's so important, especially today, when it's so easy to get caught up in our own little bubbles and avoid perspectives that challenge us.
He reminds us that true knowledge often comes from engaging with a diversity of ideas.
Seeking truth wherever it may be found.
Exactly. Is there anything else from this part of the guide that stands out to you?
There's one thing. We haven't talked about the concept of Sakshi.
Sakshi, a key element of his epistemology.
It's one of those terms I see a lot, but honestly, I've always found it a bit elusive.
I understand.
Could you explain it in a way that, even someone unfamiliar with Indian philosophy can grasp?
Okay, so imagine Sakshi as this pure consciousness, this inner witness, observing our experiences without being affected by them.
Hmm.
It's like a silent observer within us, a constant presence.
Okay.
It sees everything, but remains unchanged, unaffected by our thoughts, emotions, perceptions.
So not our thoughts or feelings
All
themselves,
right,
but something deeper that's aware of them.
exactly. And Madhvacharya believed this inner witness is present in all souls.
Okay.
But its clarity, its ability to perceive truth, depends on the soul's level of spiritual development.
So it's not something we create or develop. It's already there,
It's inherent.
but its potential is realized as we progress spiritually.
Precisely.
Okay, now how does this connect to Dvaita?
Well, Sakshi is one of the key sources of valid knowledge in Madhvacharya's system.
Okay.
It's through this inner witness that we come to know ourselves, our own existence.
Independent of our thoughts and emotions.
Exactly. And it allows us to see those fundamental differences that Dvaita emphasizes.
Right. The soul is distinct from the body and the mind. So there must be something within us that can perceive that distinction.
And that's Sakshi. It provides that transcendent perspective.
This is making me think about liberation again. If the goal is to realize our true nature as servants of God,
Right.
then this Sakshi seems crucial, like a guide on that journey.
It is. Through the clarity, the insights of Sakshi, we can move beyond the limitations of our ego, our attachments.
And experience that bliss, that connection to the divine.
Beautiful.
It is. I'm starting to get a glimpse into the depths of his philosophy, and it's incredible to think he was formulating these ideas centuries ago.
He was visionary.
But before we get too abstract, I want to bring things back down to earth.
Okay.
I'm eager to explore the Krishna temple in Udupi in more detail.
The heart of his legacy.
What makes his temple so special? How does it reflect the principles of Dvaita Vedanta?
Well, prepare to be surprised. There are some intriguing details and unique features that await us. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and philosophy of Sri Madhvacharya. We've explored the core tenets of Dvaita Vedanta, delved into his unique interpretations of ancient texts, and witnessed his prowess as a debater and scholar. Now, as promised, let's journey to the heart of his legacy, the Krishna temple in Udupi.
I'm excited to finally get to this. Every time the temple's been mentioned, I've been picturing it in my mind, trying to imagine, what makes it so special and how it embodies Madhvacharya's vision.
Well, get ready to be surprised. This temple is full of these little intriguing details and unique features that reflect both the practical and the philosophical aspects of Dvaita Vedanta. Like, did you know that the statue of Krishna in the Udupi temple faces west?
West. That's interesting. Most Hindu deities face east, right?
You're right, they usually do.
Symbolizing the rising sun and all that.
Mhm.
So is there a reason for this unique orientation?
Well, there are a few stories and interpretations surrounding this. One popular tale talks about Kanakadasa, a devotee from a lower caste. He was forbidden from entering the temple through the main entrance, so he stood outside. But he was unwavering in his devotion, and he prayed with such incredible fervor that Krishna himself turned westward to give him darshan, a
Darshan.
glimpse of the divine.
Oh, wow. That's a powerful story. It really highlights the idea that sincere devotion can transcend these social barriers and even, influence the divine.
It's a beautiful example of the accessibility of God, a concept that resonates with Dvaita's emphasis on this personal relationship with the divine.
Exactly. And you mentioned before that Madhvacharya established 8 mathas, or monasteries, around the temple,
Yes.
each with their own lineage and specific duties. It's fascinating to think about these mathas as these, branches stemming from the central trunk of Madhvacharya's teachings.
It's a wonderful analogy. And these lineages have continued unbroken to this day. The pontiffs of the 8 mathas still take turns serving at the Krishna temple, each one serving for 2 years, upholding the traditions specific to their lineage.
700 years. It's hard to wrap my mind around that kind of continuity. What are some of the rituals and practices associated with these mathas?
Well, each matha has a specific set of rituals and practices they uphold during their service. It's actually quite complex. It adds this richness and depth to the temple's traditions.
So it's not just one static set of rituals.
Not at all. It's a dynamic system, always evolving, reflecting the contributions of these different lineages.
But all connected to that foundation that Madhvacharya laid.
Exactly. It's like this living tapestry of devotion.
Okay, so we've got the mathas, the westward-facing Krishna. Are there any other features or practices that stand out, that make this temple a unique embodiment of Dvaita Vedanta?
There are a couple of things in the guide that I found really interesting. One is the Madhvasaravara.
What?
Madhvasaravara, it's a sacred pond.
Oh, a sacred pond. I love those. I've always found them fascinating. What's special about this one?
Well, it's located to the north of the temple, and it's believed to have been consecrated by Madhvacharya himself.
Hmm.
It plays a big role in the rituals associated with the temple.
In what way?
Well, pilgrims and devotees often bathe in the pond or sprinkle the water on themselves before entering the temple.
A ritual cleansing.
Exactly. Washing away impurities, preparing themselves to enter a sacred space.
It's interesting how water is used like that across so many traditions.
It's a universal symbol of purification and renewal, and a reminder that the spiritual journey involves letting go of the old and embracing the new, approaching the divine with this sense of purity and openness.
What was that other feature you mentioned?
Oh, the Kojana Shala.
Bhojana Shali?
Yes, the dining hall.
Where they serve the prasada,
Exactly.
the food offered to Krishna.
Yes. And it's not just about the spiritual significance. The guide highlights how renowned the Udupi Temple's Bhojanashala is for its food. The cooks are amazing.
A feast for the body and the soul.
I love that.
Is there anything else unique about this dining hall?
Well, after the meal, they let the cows from the Goshala, the cowshed, into the hall to eat any leftover food and banana leaves.
Oh, wow, I love that. Such respect for the cows.
And then they clean the floor with cow dung.
Right, which is considered purifying.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even the most ordinary aspects of life can be infused with this spiritual significance.
This whole deep dive has been incredible. I mean, we started with these miraculous childhood stories, then got into these complex philosophical concepts, and now we're talking about these fascinating temple traditions.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And I feel like we've only scratched the surface of Madhvacharya's legacy,
His influence is vast and multifaceted.
touching upon every aspect of life.
The intellectual, the practical, the individual, the communal. He really left his mark.
Before we wrap up, what are some key takeaways for our listener? What can they glean from all of this?
What resonates most with you?
I think the biggest thing for me is this idea of a life lived with purpose and conviction. I mean, Madhvacharya knew what he believed in, and he dedicated his life to it, even when it was challenging. He was fearless, a champion of truth.
He wasn't afraid to challenge those norms, to stand up for what he believed to be true.
Exactly. And he didn't just preach, he practiced what he preached. He sought out knowledge and understanding. He challenged, interpreted, pushed those boundaries, and he didn't shy away from different viewpoints.
He reminds us of the importance of engaging with diverse ideas, seeking truth wherever it may be found.
He was a master debater, but he also listened, you know, and he read carefully. He engaged with those opposing views to refine his own thinking, which is so important today. It's easy to just stay in our own bubbles and avoid things that make us uncomfortable.
Absolutely. He was a model for intellectual curiosity and open-mindedness.
And lastly, I think there's something really beautiful about his emphasis on devotion. This idea of recognizing that we're connected to something greater than ourselves. He saw that as the ultimate goal, right? Realizing our connection to the divine and experiencing the bliss of that. And not by losing ourselves, but by understanding our unique place in all of this.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the midst of all the chaos and complexity of life, there's this deeper truth waiting to be discovered.
It's been an amazing journey exploring Dvaita Vedanta and the legacy of Sri Madhvacharya. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this has inspired you to keep seeking knowledge and understanding wherever that journey may lead.